Hello everyone, and welcome back to week 3, module 3. Today we're going to be talking about color systems, blending modes, and adjustment layers. I'm going to kind of do brief lecture and tutorials to help you get through this week's assignments. So for starters, I thought we'd go over red, green, and blue versus cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. By now you should know red, green, and blue is for digital art, your computer. It's how we see stuff on the television, etc. And CMYK is more for print. When you get ink for your printer, there's generally the 4 different colors to help create everything. Now you'll notice that RGB, or our web digital art, doesn't have a black channel. That's because black is the absence of light. So we don't need an actual channel for black. We would just get rid of light shining. You know, for printing, you start off with a white sheet of paper, so you need that black channel, because if we actually mix these 3 together, you're just going to kind of get a mucky brown color. So to get that pure black, we need the black channel. Now, when it comes to printing, I'm just going to cover up the black for right now, your paper is white. You kind of start off with white, so when you're actually using white, you don't need to put anything there. But when we're talking about digital art and computers, you actually mix all 3 of these colors to get white. Okay, it's kind of hard to believe. I would highly recommend you get like those filter, camera colors. They're just like sheets of paper that are kind of see-through in color, and you can shine flashlights through it, and if you can get equal values of light with these 3 colors, you will see white shine. It's pretty awesome. So how does your computer understand if we're making something on the computer and let's say it's RGB but we need to convert to CMYK or vice versa? Well, it's pretty simple. So let's say we're trying to make red. Okay, you just go across the chart and remove that color. So to create red, let's make sure I'm on the correct layer here, we just get rid of the cyan and we would mix magenta and yellow. So magenta and yellow equal red. Okay, for green, we would just get rid of the magenta. Cyan and yellow make green. And for the blue, we would mix cyan and magenta to get blue. Just a little, for your information, color system theory. As always, feel free to send me an email if you want any further explanation or any questions that you might have. So let's take a look at blending modes. This is something that you're going to have to take a look at this week. I have an image that I got of a graffiti tattoo called Style. So let's say I want to make this look like it's actual graffiti on the wall behind it. Well, the first thing that's going to give it away that it is not is that it has this white box around it. So we need to get rid of that. Okay, I can go to this 4th button down, which is my quick select tool. If I click that and then start clicking and dragging over the white, it's going to actually just select everything that's touching it that is that same color of white. It's going to go to the edge of the page just because that's the edge of the document, but we really, once you let go, you can see it snaps to this actual piece. So I can hit delete on my keyboard. If you prefer to erase it, you can grab your eraser and start erasing, but the main point is that we get rid of it. I can then hit Command D or Control D to deselect, and now we just have that main graffiti up there. So if we have that layer selected, you can see up here I've got opacity, and next to it it says normal. So these are your blending modes. Okay, basically what it does is it takes that top layer, and all of these mean something different. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but it's a different way that they're blending the top layer with the bottom layer. And as always, layer order is important. So let's just play around for a second. If I go to darken, you can see we're going to see that layer through it now, and we can actually change kind of the color that's there. Okay. You can pick one that you kind of like, playing around with different things. I'm going to go back up to maybe darken, kind of like the way that looks. You can always lower the opacity as well. If you're thinking this looks great, but that top layer is just still too vibrant, you can lower the opacity, and little tiny bits aren't noticed. If you crank it all the way, you're obviously going to notice a big difference. But if you just lower it a little bit, you can start to see some more of the detail from the lower level layer. So I would definitely play around with these different ones. They only work though if you have 2 layers, because it's blending that upper layer with the bottom layer. So if you just have one, it's going to look weird. So you'll see, let me turn up the opacity all the way. If I were to just be dealing with one layer, none of these are changing anything because it's not seeing through to the other layer. So I'll be looking for you to find different ways to use this within your art. A couple other things I'm looking for. I got this image from your book. I would highly recommend that you look at chapter 12. It starts on page 215, and it really gives an in-depth description of these adjustment layers. And it would be really helpful to kind of go through them all and make sure you understand them all. Because again, when it comes to art, we want to use the software to create your vision, not just use different buttons and say, oh, okay, well, that looks cool. You want to be like, I wish I could bring out the green more, or I wish I could do something else to it. And then we use the tools to accomplish that. Okay, so that was a sneak peek of what I'm doing here. I'm going to delete these layers. So here's what I have. And with any image that you start with, think, how can I make this better? How can I change the feeling of it? Why am I editing this? What am I looking for? Well, looking at this image, it's all kind of a lighter shade, and we've got these yellows, oranges, greens, and then we've got this red here and here. So let's say I want to make this apple more of a green apple because I want these berries to pop even more. Okay? So I can make sure you've double clicked on your layer so that it's not locked anymore. So allow you to edit a little bit more efficiently. And then we can use that same tool, the quick select tool that I used for the brick wall. And I can click and drag on the red of that apple. Now, you can either apply your adjustment layer directly to a selection like this, or you can copy and paste the selection so you have a completely different layer to play around with. Sometimes I do it by copying and pasting because it allows me to edit a little bit more. So I'll just do a copy and a paste. That's Command-C, Command-V on a Mac, or Control-C, Control-V on a PC. And nothing's changed. I've just copied and pasted this apple piece on its own layer. All right, so now I can look at adjustment layers. And adjustment layers help you change the saturation, the color, the vibrance. There's a ton. So if we look in our panels over here, there's actually an adjustment panel. If you don't see it, you can go to Window Adjustments. Also, it might just be, you might be in the library and you might have to click on adjustments. So just like most things in Photoshop, if you hold your mouse over it, you can see what each one kind of is. So create a new brightness contrast layer, or levels, curves, exposure, etc., etc. So I want to make this apple green. So what that's going to be is hue saturation. Hue is color, saturation is how vibrant is that color. So if I click on that, it brings up this Properties tab. Now in most of these adjustment layers, you'll see that there are different options. So I can take the master, which is all colors, or I can tell it to only look at the reds and we're going to adjust that, or the greens, etc. I'm just going to stick with master since I know I have my apple in its own layer. So then I can take this hue and start clicking and dragging. And you can see it's really going to change a bunch of stuff. It could go for almost a sci-fi fruit plate now. Okay, but I'm mainly focusing on my apple here, so I'm ignoring my blue oranges now. But I can see that apple looks pretty good, I think. You can play around with saturation. Again, if we crank this up, it's going to be super vibrant. If you crank it all the way down, it's going to go to a grayscale. So I'm going to just give it, to keep it kind of in the middle. I can adjust the lightness if I want. I don't want to really bring it too much. Okay. So, well, that's great, Jen, but now my whole image is kind of this vibrant color. If you look at your Properties tab at the bottom here, there's a button that is to, right now, the adjustment affects all the layers below it. But I just want this hue saturation to affect the layer right underneath it. So I can click that button, and now my apple is green, but the rest of my image is normal. And I have this on a separate layer because now I can toggle just that layer to see what my apple looks like. Okay? So, layer order matters. Let's say I'm going to delete that apple layer that I have here. Let's say I do this hue saturation, and then I put a brightness contrast on top of it. We'll lower the brightness and crank up the contrast. We've got the image that looks like this. If I change the order, you can see it wasn't the biggest of changes, but depending upon what your two layers are, there's definitely a change. Looks like almost a Hawaiian, I don't know, meal. But, so brightness and contrast, again, you can really bring up the difference. Contrast, you know, if we turn this all the way down, it becomes more of a, let's bring this back, flat kind of color versus difference between the lights and the darks. Brightness is going to bring it closer to white or closer to black. You can use that. I'm going to turn off the eyeball on that one for a second. We have levels. Levels helps to adjust your top brightest colors, the whites, and your darkest blacks. So you've got three. This is your mid-tone, your darks, and your lights. So you can click these hangers and drag. Basically what's happening is this white shows all the different colors that are in our system, and you're getting rid of, you know, these are our darkest kind of tones, and we're now making this tone section here the darkest our document will go. So now we're just kind of darkening all of these to the extreme. You can do it the opposite way and make all these colors the brightest of whites. You can look at different presets for it. You can focus in on specific colors and do that. You can also use these eyedroppers to select specific colors as well. And let's take a look at curves. Curves kind of does the same thing, but it's a different way of looking at it. You can see we have this straight line from top to bottom, and then we have this chart showing what kind of colors and brightness levels we have in our actual document. Now this is adjusting the highlights, this is adjusting the shadow, and you can click and create points in the middle. So I can click and drag that point, and by saying I want my mid-tone range to be in here, you can see that it's dropping the darker tones as well. You can add as many points as you would like to adjust different things. You can kind of get different funky looks. You can also look at the presets here. Color negative is kind of interesting. Make things just a little darker. So you can see that's the straight line that we started with. Their darker version is just pulling that mid-tone down a little bit, bringing everything a little darker. And you can focus in here as well on RGB or just the reds, the greens, and the blues. So let's do red. And then if we pull this red line down, we're actually removing the red from our picture. So that's why everything looks a lot different. And if we bring it up, we're adding red to our entire document. So if you wanted to give something a hint of color or tint it a little bit, this is a good way to do that as well, if you didn't want to do hue saturation. Photoshop's a great program that kind of allows you to do things in a bunch of different ways. Okay, so I hope this helps you guys to get a little start on this week, and you guys have been doing great so far. I've looked at a bunch of your assignments from Module 2, and I will get to grading them as soon as I can. And just before we go really quickly, I wanted to show you guys blending modes. So there's this website, it's northlight.net /ps/blend.htm. And you don't have to use this as a reference. I just think it's great to show you guys back from the beginning the blending modes. So this is their background layer and their layer 1, and they kind of show you what each one would look like and go into further detail of how it's actually being affected. So feel free to take a look at this, go through it so you can kind of understand exactly why what's happening is happening. Alrighty? I will talk to you all soon. I hope you have a wonderful week.